Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Design Recharge. We've just been having a little before the show laughter with my friend Rusty Mitchell, and Rusty's going to talk to us about UX, UI, or UX, UI. I don't know, whatever. He's talking about one of those.
Just going to talk about creepy
app
dolls.
design, and we're going to start off with creepy dolls. So I know Rusty, we both went to VCU, and he was a year ahead of me, and so Rusty showed this doll earlier than the before, but it was so good that you have to show them now. So bring her out.
The thing about this is everything after this is going to be a letdown for all you folks. So.
No, it's not. It's just different. Okay.
All right, here we go. So this is Shrinking Violet, evidently.
1963, made by Mattel.
Yeah, it's a gift from my mother-in-law, which maybe tells you a little something about my relationship with my mother-in-law. So
Okay.
It says a few things here, but we'll see what it says this time.
Will you take care of me?
Okay, so she said, "Will you take care of me?"
Okay. It sounds sort of like, will you touch something? I don't know. Like,
No.
I love her hairline.
People are so good.
Well, I don't know what she said.
That was
time.
another language, right?
Will you take care of me?
Will you take care of me? She really wants to be taken care of.
Will you take care of me?
Seriously.
Her eyes, like one of them sort of like,
Will you take care of me?
she says something about noisy boys.
I think she actually said Rusty that time.
Will you take care of me?
Okay, we can't do it anymore.
Okay, well, anyway, so he likes these crazy kind of weird toys, right?
Yeah. I collect odd things.
So I've always just really enjoyed Rusty, and I hadn't seen Rusty in a few years until 2 years ago. I was standing in line for something at Creative South, and he's in outside of Nashville, right?
Yep.
And so he was there. I was like, Rusty, and it was just like old times. So it was really nice. And he goes every year, and he brings his design team. So again, we're always talking about Creative South right before it comes because we just love that conference. So Rusty, tell us a little bit about you, because you actually went to grad school. You did undergrad at Austin P and studied design. Give us a little bit of your background, and then why you decided to go to grad school, and then what you did after grad school.
Okay. So, and I guess my reasons for going to grad school were probably horrible. Like, it's kind of just the basic stuff of, I want the option to teach at some point, but I don't know if teaching is really for me. So I had spent about a year in the music scene in Nashville doing packaging design. And before I got too deep into that, I kind of felt like if I spent too much time in the professional world, I'd just never go back to school. So, whereas a lot of people will wait a few years before they go to grad school, I only waited about a year. And then I went pretty much straight on to grad school from there. And once I got finished, I was like, well, I'm done. I'm not really ready to teach at this point. So I know how to do this music packaging thing. I think I like that. Mm-hmm. And so I went back and did that. And so I moved back here, and for 3 or 4 years after that, I worked some freelance. And for about 3 of those years, I worked for a company called Provident Music here in Nashville, which they're a Christian music label that they run like Essential Records and Reunion Records. I don't even know, what all their labels are now. But I worked as an in-house designer doing music packaging and marketing materials for those guys with some great designers. And after a couple of times of the company kind of switching hands, like it was a BMG company, and then BMG and Sony merged. And every time there was a merger, there were layoffs. We went through one of those. It was really painful. And the second one, I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. And so there was an opportunity back at Austin P to teach. They had hired a new design professor who had backed out on them at the last minute. And So they were looking for somebody, and I was looking to get out of the situation that I was in. So I moved over and taught at Austin Peay for a year. And when that was finished, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do after that. So I spent more time freelancing, and this opportunity came up at this company that at the time was called Mercury Sports. And Mercury Sports was doing desktop applications. This is going to sound super weird, but they were screensavers that you could interact with. So, like normally you move your mouse and the screensaver goes away and everybody celebrates, that they can do the thing on their computer that they really want to do. And you're like, no, we got a better idea. So when you would move your mouse, it wouldn't go away, but you could quickly hit escape or whatever and get out of it. But they were interactive in the way that they would still show these full screen photos, but there was a little bar at the bottom that would show you additional information. It would tease information from a website, and all of our clients were sports based. So there would be sports scores and links, and we had 12 NFL teams that signed up. We had Sports Illustrated, we had Golf Magazine, and Sports Illustrated, of course, these beautiful full screen photos. And with the NFL, it was pretty cool because they would send photos directly from the team photographer after every game. So we would scramble on Sunday night every week after the games were over and pull in all these photos. And some of the teams were better than others. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't mention specific teams, but some of the teams would send 3 or 4 photos, and some of them would be really bad. And then you would have people and I'll brag on these guys, the Green Bay Packers, who had 2 team photographers, and they would send us hundreds of photos after every game. And we would go through and we'd pick the top 10 or 15 photos, and we would clean those up, and we'd make sure that they were in the application ready to go the next morning when people would come back into work or sit down at their computer at home. And the fans loved that. And it was actually pretty cool. But we couldn't find a way to make it work monetarily. So when I joined the company in 2005, that's what we were doing. And we had a team of 12 to 15 folks. And after close to 2 years of that, it was clear that it really wasn't working. We were running out of the funding that we had, and we laid a lot of folks off. We scaled down to about 5 people, and for about 1.5 years, I walked in here not knowing whether I was still going to have a job at the end of the day. And it's not the best way to work. But we, around that time, saw that mobile was coming on, and we were all big Apple fanboys, most of us here. And we're always talking about, maybe we should do something for this iPhone. And so we walked into, and you let me know if I'm blabbing on too much, you can jump in here. But we walked into USA Today in late 2008, and we were actually pitching them on this screensaver product. We're
right, because actually kind of is similar.
Yeah, we got a brilliant idea for you guys. Big photos of news, and at the bottom we'll have headlines and some weather and some scores, and we'll have this toolbar that's at the bottom that's always there for your brand. And they were like, how about not really that, but we're about to start this RFP process for an iPhone application. Do you guys do that? Yeah, we do. And I lost Diane. So we're going to go back to the doll now, since Diane's not here.
I wish people wouldn't look at me.
I also wish people wouldn't look at me.
I'm sorry, I have no idea what I did. I moved my mouse and it went blank. So, okay, keep going.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. RFP process. That was a different sound that she made this time.
She said, I wish people wouldn't look at me.
1963. That's weird.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, they asked if we did iPhone apps? And we were like, yeah, sure we do. And so we went back to our office. This was like, we met with them out in McLean in Virginia, where they're based. And we came back to Nashville, and we scrambled for a week or two and like cobbled together this thing, and it was all smoke and mirrors. And we were like, this is convincing.
So 5 people? There are 5 people now at the company at this time?
Yeah, there were about 5 of us.
Okay, so you had a coder then, right?
Yep.
You had you to do design.
Yep.
And then who else?
We had a CEO. We had an operations guy. Kind of did some project management and business guy. Yeah, I mean, there was. So
it's really you and the coder are like figuring out how to do this.
Yeah.
And then the other 3 people are behind your back, like, can we do this? Can we do this?
Come on, get it done already.
Okay, so you, and again, that's how it is in our field. Like a lot of times we don't really know how to do something and we weren't trained in it, but we have to just keep going and figure it out, right? And that's how a lot like web design is. That's how things get going forward. That's invention, right?
Yeah, and we weren't really sure if we were going to be able to pull it off, but we had this platform that we were using for the screensaver stuff. And there were lots of things there that we thought translated really well to mobile. Because when mobile first came out, I don't know if you remember, but it was super slow. Like the network really stunk. So, you had to be really more conscious of image sizes and the download packets and whatnot. And we had some things in that product like offline analytics, so that if you weren't on a network and you launched the application, it would still track what you were doing. And all of those things worked really well for mobile. So that was part of our selling point as well, is not only did we eventually get into mobile and do good work from a design perspective, but we had a good back end that made USA Today's app, when it came out, just tons faster than the competition. And like the only 2 really good news applications that were out there at the time was an app by the Associated Press and the New York Times. And those applications, even though they were fairly well done, they were dog slow. And so when our application came out and it was much more robust than those applications and visually more interesting, and it was tons faster, suddenly we had all these news guys calling us saying, we don't understand why what you guys are doing is so much better than what everybody else is doing, but we want you to help us do it.
So maybe it was an advantage that you weren't in that marketplace already, because you maybe would have been held down by some of those other things that everybody else was already doing. Maybe it was a blessing that you were doing web-based things, right?
Perhaps.
That sounds like something Shrinking Violet would say. Perhaps. Anyway, go ahead.
Don't touch me, Diane.
I know. And if you're just tuning in, we had a crazy, creepy doll early on, and we'll bring her back in the end. Okay. So you get to be this.
I like how people liked that. They're like, yes, that's why I'm here.
We're waiting. Pilot. That's right. All right. So really so at that time, so this was like 2005, you started working for Mercury. What year was USA Today? And that's a big client to have for the beginning.
Yeah. So that was late 2008. And so that application actually launched right before Christmas. And the way the App Store stuff is set up, it closes pretty much every year right around the holidays. And what that means is it goes dark for us to like track analytics to see like how many downloads. We can't see user reviews or any of those things. And that typically goes on for 5 or 6 days. And the Christmas holidays are by far the most popular time for people to download apps, because they're getting brand new phones for Christmas. And it's been like this every year since the iPhone first came out, since the App Store's been out. Every year at Christmas, the download numbers are just astronomical compared to what your normal daily downloads are. So we launched that app. We'd never had an app in the App Store. We had no idea what the reception was going to be. And it immediately goes dark for 5 days. And we're like, well, hope it's going well. and it comes back. And
so like what day did it launch?
It was a Saturday because I was actually at a family Christmas party, and I got a message from one of the guys who was like, "Oh God, it's live. What are we gonna do?"
And it's still only the 5 of you, right?
Yeah. And not only, at that time, and we don't do this for most of our clients now, but at that time we were just like, you know what, we're going to give you guys a sweetheart deal on this because we had no experience. And we're like, yeah, sure, we'll do all of it. So like, not only did we do the development and the design, but we're like, we'll handle tech support. Sure.
5 people.
Yeah. So like I did most of the tech support for the longest time, for like maybe the first year or so that the USA Today app was out, which is crazy. But maybe we should talk a little bit about that because it gave me a better appreciation for users. So let's circle back to that in a second.
Okay.
But yeah, what was I talking about before that?
I have ADD. I can't keep up. No, I'm just kidding. I just enjoy the conversation. That's what I use the chat for and my students for. But I think you were talking about tech support. We were talking about, before tech support, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
We were talking about downloads, and I said it went dark. What day? You said it was a Saturday. See, I can remember sometimes.
So it came back, and we had like 50,000 installs, which was huge at that point. I mean, it's just like a drop in the bucket now, but at that point it was like amazing. And the app was #1 in the news category. And awesome. And it was like in the top 25 overall in the store. I think it got up to like #3 or something. And Apple was like, we want to promote this app. And we're like, okay, are you sure? And so it just all went really well, like right from the start. And so we had, all these other news organizations who were like, we want you to do what you did for USA Today for us. And, the app started like winning some awards and getting some recognition. And, that was super fun, to do this thing that was unfamiliar, that we weren't sure that we were going to be good at, and to have some early success. And what really helped there from a company perspective is that as part of this like sweetheart deal that we gave USA Today, they agreed to mention us in their PR for the app, and they allowed us to put this giant Mercury designed and developed on the About page. And that was huge for our business after that. I mean, those first 2 years, we turned down so much work because there were just so few of us. I mean, we just couldn't do it.
5 people still, or were you able to get some help?
We started hiring pretty much right away, but it was hard because like no one had experience at that. So, to scale up the company took a while, and now it's like 36 of us now, and we're pretty evenly split between iOS and Android. We do all native work. It's really more of a development company than design, even though they place a lot of value on design. So, I don't feel out of place here as a designer. But, it's a development company first.
Right.
Yeah.
But they value design. They can do everything, but a lot of times you'll get companies that come in, they have maybe a design team internally, and maybe they're coming in just for development. And maybe you would help them a little bit, maybe in something like that, just so that it was more functional. Yeah.
So for USA Today, it was all design, all development. We had a great design contact there. It's a young guy who is now like out in the Bay Area. Has worked for Twitter for years, but it's a super great guy to work with. And I think that's key. Like, I think our best successes with clients has not been when they necessarily don't have design representation and we handle everything and there's not design feedback from the company. I think it's best when they trust us to do the design, but they have some say, they have some feedback to give. They want to be involved.
Right. Okay. So can we circle back now about the tech support a little bit? Because that probably helped you a little bit with some of the user experience, right? Designing
Right.
for them.
Yeah, I think it's easy when you read tech support because these guys are almost always, if they're reaching out to you, it's almost always because they're unhappy. And if they're unhappy enough to send a message to you, they're probably going to be super rude about it. And so at first I would read those things and be like, well, you're stupid. You just don't know what you're doing. And you don't understand how much work we put into this. And, you need to just back off. Like,
you were too sensitive, too married, and you were like, you don't get it. Right.
And after like a few days of reading that stuff, it like suddenly occurred to me that, you know what, these people have taken the time to contact us because they care enough about the work that we've done. They care enough about the information that our client is providing to them that they want to be able to find it, and they're having trouble finding it. Or, the application's crashing and they don't understand why. And,
right.
We need to help them understand why. And so, we started taking a better approach to communicating with them. And it was amazing how many of those guys would immediately, as soon as you responded back to them, reply back and be like, oh, well, I just assumed that no one was listening to this, that I would never get a reply, that no one cared. And as soon as they found out that somebody cared, their entire tone would change. They'd be like, I love your app. I want this one thing, to work. And like, we would explain that one thing, or we would fix a problem. Or in some instances, like one of the problems that we had with USA Today when it first launched is we had this custom slider bar that was across the top of the news section that allowed you to jump between news categories. So it's like top news and sports and life and money and those types of things. And that bar would slide left and right because we didn't have enough room to fit all of those categories on the screen at once. And so some people would be like, well, I don't understand why the life section cuts off and why the travel section isn't there at all. And we thought we were being really clear because we had this little arrow and we had a shadow where the text went underneath the shadow. And we're like, this is clear. Everybody should get this. And for the most part, people did, but there was a small percentage of folks that didn't get it. And so we would, we get these tech support requests about, how do I deal with this? And some of the guys at USA Today were like, this is not working. Like, we need to just throw this out and start over. And I'm like, well, your app's currently #1 in news and it's doing great and Apple's promoting it. Maybe we don't just throw everything away. Maybe we find a better approach to help the people who don't understand without alienating all the folks who have already told us they love the application and they understand how it works. So what we did is, instead of changing the presentation of it, we added a little bit of animation to it so that bar, the first time you launch the application, would kind of slide in from the right into place. And when the user interacted with it and proved that they understood how it worked, we'd stop doing that animation. But until they did, we would reinforce. We would show that animation again. But we tried to be subtle about it. We would only show it once per launch. And so, like, if you moved away from the news section into scores or something and then jumped back, we weren't going to just beat you over the head with it. And we found that worked really well. Just use some little subtle animation to direct the user without totally changing everything up. And all those tech support issues went away really quickly after that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've really been doing app design. Okay, so Chad wants to know, is this Chad Powell, my old student, Chad Powell? Anyway, maybe not. But he wants to know, he's in Colorado if he is, and I do believe he works in this. Yay, hey, Chad. He just got married. Anyway, happy marriage. how did you handle user testing? Because I believe, Chad, you're in this, San Antonio now. Sorry. But he was in Colorado for a while. So, and you're in this, this is your field, right? You're doing this kind of design, Chad? Okay. Yes, he says. Okay.
So, as you might guess, like everything else, we handled it by the seat of our pants. And a lot of the user testing stuff really is dictated by our clients. We typically, because of timelines and budgets, don't do a lot of that ourselves, although we have been involved with some of our clients with that. But with this particular project, there was no user testing before the app came out, outside of the kind of standard stuff where, you know, we're showing it to people outside of the company, and they're handing it to people in USA Today and to people outside of USA Today who they trust to get opinions. But there was not a broad, like, specific organized user testing.
So how do you do that now? Because you're much deeper in mobile now. So how?
Yeah.
Because I think it would be different. I mean, when it's just 5 of you, you're doing the best you can. You're probably working Sunday nights. You're working every night.
Yeah. There's still a lot of that gets it ends up getting handled by our clients at this point. So once
is that something you help them set up, sort of, though? Or
we may provide some feedback into like how to do it, but we don't have a ton of input into that. And, you know, typically they'll hire a group that's their thing. That's what they specialize in, to manage the user testing piece of it.
Okay. So, and
but
also
it's, you know, a lot of times it can be really informal, and, you know, that can be a little nerve-wracking sometimes, but this is not going to be a popular thing to say. I tend to lean a lot more on intuition than user testing. And part of that is because that's where my success has come, and that's what I'm familiar with, and that's what's worked for us. And I think whatever works for you, if that's what you're comfortable with, is the user testing, and you've had your successes that way, then that's great. And, you know, we're going to leverage everything that we possibly can to make our products better. And I think that that's ultimately what you've got to do.
I think sometimes people have, when they're early in the game, they're trying to prove to clients maybe, or prove, you know, that this is going to work or something. And so I think sometimes user testing is used earlier on before you've kind of made your name, or, you know, proved yourself. Or no, am I crazy?
Say that again.
So I would think that it's, you know, people do user testing all the time. You know, they do it with toilet paper, you know, but I would think that, you know, if you're a new toilet paper maker, right, or a new app designer, then I would think that you might use user testing more in the beginning because you're figuring it out.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes I get really suspect of user testing because I feel like people tend to ask the questions to get the answers that they want. Or they end up asking the wrong questions altogether. And so there's this thing that always comes back to me. It was an example in this Malcolm Gladwell book called Blink, talking about the Pepsi challenge, which, are you familiar with the Pepsi challenge?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I drink Coke.
Yeah. So it was this thing in the 80s where Pepsi like put out these tables at your local grocery. And when you would walk in, they'd say, "Hey, you want to take the Pepsi challenge?" And they would give you this tiny little like mouthwash cup of Coke and Pepsi. And they were legit about it. They would hand you both. And they would say, "Okay, which one did you like?" And people resoundingly were like, "Pepsi is better than Coke. Absolutely. We love it." And so Coke was like, "Well, they are skewing this somehow. Like, what are they doing?" So they ran the test themselves, and the results came back, and Coke got the same results that Pepsi did.
That people liked Pepsi better?
That people liked Pepsi better. And they were like, "What is going on?" And so they changed the entire formula, the recipe for Coke. And they threw the old recipe out, and they launched New Coke in like 83 or 84. I don't know.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was this huge backlash against it. And everybody's like, this New Coke is terrible. It's so bad. And they eventually reverted back to the old formula for Coke.
Classic Coke.
Yeah, classic Coke. And what they found out is that the studies were not wrong, that if you're given a small little amount of Pepsi and a small amount of Coke, people prefer the Pepsi. They prefer the Pepsi because it's sweet and it's better in small doses. But if someone is going to drink a glass of Coke or Pepsi, they almost always prefer the Coke over the Pepsi because it's not as sweet and it's just more palatable.
And they have a better, they're like brand, they've like have brand loyalty big time.
Yeah. Let's not pretend that brand loyalty is not a part of it. But, what ended up happening is that for Coke to figure out what was really accurate, they had to send the drink home with the users and have them drink it how they would normally drink it. And I think that's important for, how we handle user testing is like, it gets really dangerous because like you're putting people in this weird scenario where there's somebody looking over their shoulder,
right,
or they're in an unfamiliar location, or, you're giving them something that they're not interested in. They're motivated to be interested in this particular thing. And so it's really easy for results to get skewed. And, I think under the right circumstances that user testing can be helpful, but people have to trust their intuition, especially when you have experience at something. And like, we have some experience, we have some proven things that we know from our own experiences and from the experiences of other applications in the field at this point to know what typically works. And, you have to pay attention to those things. Right.
All right. So Andre has a question, and then I want to answer our question from Kent. So I hope, Kent, you're still in here. So Andre asked, and he's in Portugal. He always comes. Isn't that cool? All right. So awesome. He's a great illustrator. So he says, hello, Rusty. Is there a market for illustration, as in freelance, in mobile apps? Or is it usually done in hands? Or does it depend?
Well, like everything else, I think it really does depend. And most of the illustration at this point is, you're talking about iconography. Although there is more illustration and photography in some of the applications. It's typically more driven by startups and companies that are looking to really make a splash. So they really have to depend on visuals to help get their new product off the ground. So yeah, there's some great companies, especially around iconography. Like the Icon Factory has been doing icon design for years as a Mac company at first, and they did a lot of stuff where they would give away these free icon packs. And I followed those guys all the way back to like late 1990s, but they're still at it, and they eventually did a lot of desktop stuff. They did some work for Microsoft on Windows in the early 2000s, and now they do a lot of iOS work. They do some app development of their own, but they still do a lot of app icon design and the icons for like the tab bar and those types of things inside of the application. We actually hired those guys to do the app icon for Crossly, which was this crossword application. It's the only application that we've ever released directly to users in the store. And we did that as a bit of a passion project, and partially so that we could experience the whole process for ourselves. Because it's one thing to tell your clients how something should be done. It's another thing to experience it for yourself. So it was a great learning experience for us to be invested in some things that we're typically not invested in.
So usually it's you're going out, you're going to hire somebody else. And I guess really if you were trying to find somebody, it's people who have put themselves out there that they can do these things, correct?
Yeah. And, Dribbble gets some criticism for being all about flashy design, but it's about things looking pretty more than things being functional. And I don't think that Dribble is always a great place for people to show off UI and navigation type things. But for illustration and photo-centric design, especially like posters and those types of things, Dribble can be great for that. There's so many good illustrators and icon designers that are showing off work on Dribble. It's a great place to discover those types of designers.
Cool. All right. So let me read you Kent's, and I'm going to do my best. Like I wrote it in Scribble Scrabble, it looks like. So,
Excellent.
So he's also a professor at Mississippi College. And he says, what should we be teaching these students? What maybe are we, because this is something you and I talked about. You were like, well, I don't know. I wasn't trained in this. I don't feel like it's kind of like maybe the superposer syndrome a little bit, right? But you clearly can do it because you are doing it. So there is no superposer, superpower, Rusty, right? But what would you think, telling me as a professor who teaches, what would you want me to be able to teach somebody?
So, I had a long conversation with another friend of mine who teaches out at a school in Denver. And, I was like, you guys should really be, teaching some classes on app design. And a lot of what they do is online courses. And I think they have some requirements so that even the courses that they teach on campus have to be structured in a way, like every course has to be structured in a way that it can also be taught online. Mm-hmm. And he said, there's just no way that they could ever do it because by the time they got everything set up so that it could be taught online, it would be out of date.
Changed.
Yeah. Because this industry is changing constantly. And like the core things for me, I'm distracted by one of the comments here.
So Kent says, actually, should I be including app design in my web design class? And I think he has 2 web design classes, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe. And the two things are similar. But, I actually feel like sometimes it's dangerous because I run across a lot of web designers, people that I've hired, because there's not a lot of people, especially, again, early on, who were experienced in app design. And I didn't have an app design background. So, I've got to trust that if you're a good designer and you're intelligent and you're going to be good to work with, that you're going to be able to pick these things up. But what I found with web designers is that a lot of those guys would come in to the app design process saying, I got this. This is something I know. This is so similar to what I already do with web design. It's okay. So maybe the touch targets have to be a little bit bigger or whatever, but it's okay. Just back away. And so then like after a month or two of people that I've hired who were from that background, they're like, this is really a lot different. I have to think about things differently than I did for the web. And but we run into these same issues with our clients where they a lot of times will have a lot of in-house web design representation, but not a lot of app design representation. And if you run into one of those guys, it's just like, leave me alone. I've got this. It can make the whole process really difficult.
One thing when I was just looking at the images that you sent me, which I think kind of goes with this, talking about this a little bit. So I want to show some of these because you did the TED Talks. You personally did the TED Talks one app. So what I think is so neat is that you're actually having to do so many more screens and so many different kinds. Like with the web, sometimes you're kind of making a general kind of framework and then you're handling some things different on different pages. But generally, it all has to work with the family. And granted, that has to happen, but it's on such a smaller scale and there's so much more information and things flow differently, left, right, up, down, there's all these other aspects. So when I was just looking at these images that you sent, I was like, man, these are so many different like templates, and I don't know if you're going to be able to use these again. So I'm going to just show a couple of these because really I think the main stuff you sent me was this. So this is a mini player. So what happens, guys, if you're new, you just go ahead and click on the link in the chat. It's going to pull up the image. And Rusty, you can also click on it too. So it's not going to close me out. So you can click on it. So do you want to talk about this mini player and just kind of go through these?
Yeah, let's talk about this. I'm going to throw this on my second screen over here. Yeah. So just to be clear, this is a new version of the TED application that's not currently in the store. And we've been working with TED for a little over 4 years, only on their Android products. So they very early on got in with a guy named Matt Drance, who used to work at Apple, who handled all their iOS work. And I think he's since transitioned it off to someone else. But they had iOS covered, but they needed help on Android. And they went to Google and asked who they should be talking to. And Google, we were one of the companies that Google recommended that they talk to. And we ended up working with them. So we worked with them for almost 5 years now, close to 5 years. And so, we did an initial app for them back then. It was very successful. Like Google ended up featuring it as one of their apps of the year in 2012 and 2014, I think. They featured it in this thing they did in summer of 2013 on beautifully designed apps for Android. And so, that application has had some good success, but at this point it's 4 years old and a lot has changed in Android, and they've introduced this entire new visual language for the system called Material Design. And so it was time to do a redesign. So we did this entire redesign focused around doing something that would fit in with the system, which I think is important. We could talk a little bit about that because, sometimes people are like, well, I want to be unique. I want to be different. I want to stand out. And I think
it's about the language that they already know. And that's really important.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really important that people open up your application and immediately know how to get around, because they want to be wowed by your app, but they more so want to be wowed by the content within your app. People get excited about the talks. My design for TED is never going to be as exciting as what the folks who speak at TED have to say.
It's the road, not the journey, right? You're doing the road, and you want to take them on a journey, and you want them to enjoy their journey. But
yeah. So with the new TED app, a lot of it was about, on the design side, was about cleaning it up and modernizing it for Material. On the back end, we're trying to restructure everything so that, it's more modern on the back end of things, because, it's four-year-old cruft behind the scenes as well. And, we've added on features at that time. So a lot of things are bolted on. So we need to go back and rethink how we've done some of that stuff. And then we're adding new features along the way as well. So when the new TED application launches, and hopefully that's in a month or so, it's going to have this little mini player. And along with doing video, it's going to be a whole lot better about audio, so that you can listen to talks while you're in your car on your commute. And it has this entire new feature where the NPR Radio Hour, which is a partnership that TED has with NPR, will be prominently featured within the application as well. And
I'm sharing just a bunch of images that you sent me.
And even though it's not going to make it into the initial launch, one of the big things that we're into the initial relaunch, one of the things that we're going to build into this as well is account sync, because that's a big feature that we've heard from users, is they can sign in on the web and like certain content or something, and they want to do that in the application as well.
Right, and you want it to be, oh, this is where you left off. Like that can be really frustrating. It's like, oh crap, now I got to go get my phone to get caught up to where I was or whatever.
Yeah, and maybe we should talk a little bit about process here, about what our process is, because our process, again, seat of our pants. We made it up as we go along. It's what's worked for us. Don't feel like you have to mimic what we do, because it worked for us, do what works for you. But we typically start out by meeting with our clients and trying to understand as much as we can about what their goals are for the application. Are you wanting to make money, or is it stalls or features? Are you trying to impress your CEO? What's driving this particular engagement? And once we understand that, then we've got to back up and really understand their content and try to understand it as much as they do. So we'll go and study everything that they have to offer. So if they already have a web property, or in the case of newspapers, I'm going to pull everything out. I'm going to go and download the e-reader version of their app. I'm going to go and purchase the print version, not because I necessarily expect for our mobile application to look or behave at all like their print version, but I want to understand why people like USA Today. And I want that experience to be represented in our application.
You're doing your due diligence by doing the research.
Yeah. And so then we start nailing down what the main sections of the application are going to be. And you're talking about something that, especially for phone, it's a small space. So, I think to establish what that primary navigation is going to be right off the bat really informs so much of what the rest of the design is going to be within the app. So if we can get the primary navigation nailed down, we can get some of the branding elements in place, the rest of the screens typically pretty well fall into place. Now, when we're doing design, when we really get down and we've gotten those 3 or 4 screens, which we typically start out with a set of 3 or 4 screens that we'll do multiple options on, and we'll show those to clients, and we'll talk about some pros and cons of each of those things, and we try to drive them in a particular direction. Doesn't always work out. Sometimes things get Frankenstein together. Sometimes they pick the option that we would prefer. They pick the other option. So you got to be careful not to show things that you're not comfortable actually making it out the door.
So I have a question. I know I'm interrupting you, but what about like the mini player? Was that something they came with, or was that something you guys decided to help them with?
So
and the thing with being able to play it in your car, like that also seems like.
So a lot of times they're going to come to us with things that some features that across the board they're wanting to build in. So they've made some plans where they want a particular feature to go in on web and on iOS and Android. So sometimes we don't help them with those particular decisions. But there are times where we'll see that something's not working properly, or there's a particular feature that we've noticed that is kind of under their radar that we're like, what? We're seeing from our own usage that you should do this. Or what? Android's really good at this, and you may not know that, but you should do this particular thing. And we don't always have this luxury, but we're actually, the TED guys specifically, we were supposed to meet up with them in a couple of weeks, where we're doing this summit where we've worked with them long enough that they're trying to pull in all of their different mobile representatives for iOS and Android and across the board, and we're all going to sit in the same room together and make sure that we're on the same page. Because whereas some companies, some applications try to prioritize parity between all their platforms, TED hasn't always done that. So, the iOS group may get a particular feature before we do, or we've had translation information in our application for a long time, and I'm not sure if iOS has that feature yet. But as far as the mini player specifically, the mini player as an item on mobile is something that's a lot of applications have used. Google uses it in their music player. Some of the podcasting apps use it. So when TED came to us and said, we want to prioritize audio. We want audio to have more significance in this app. We knew that one way to do that and keep it convenient so that people can navigate around and see other things is to have this little mini player where if somebody walks in and you're listening to this, you can still really easily pause it, but you can move around the rest of the application and discover new things.
Right. So Kent has another question, and we only have 10 minutes left. So We'll just have to, I know we got through one question. We'll have to have Rusty back on. Okay, so he can't also wants to know. I think it's kind of weird that it's coming from her neck too, like that. Like then they started pulling from the side or whatever, right? Yep. All right. So what are you looking for in a design student, like from purely a design standpoint, and then maybe from a coding standpoint? So one of the questions that Kent and I had, or conversations that we had, I think he talked about this earlier in a thing over there. It was like jQuery, all this coding. What are you learning? And Rusty, I know, knows a little bit, but he doesn't know a ton, right? So what are you looking for, and what should we be teaching, coding wise as well as design wise?
So on the app side, and this is another one of those things where I'm not going to necessarily give the party line answer. There are a lot of designers who are like, designers should code. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's just, you have to do it. And I think if you're motivated to do that and you have a passion for it, that's great. I think what's more important is that you need to understand enough about the platforms that you're designing for that you know when you're getting into dangerous territory. So that, you know, you're going to do all the due diligence. You're going to go and download other applications and see what you can learn from those apps. You're going to use the system apps and understand them. If you're designing for iOS, you're going to go and download the human interface guidelines that Apple gives you, which is the set of guidelines recommendations for how you should design for iOS. And you're going to read through them and you're going to understand those things. And then when you get to a point where you decide that the standard approaches don't work, or there is no standard approach for what you need to do, you're going to go and find a smart, qualified developer, and you're going to sit down with them, even though it's difficult and it's awkward because we're shy a lot of times and they're shy and we don't necessarily speak the same language. And you're going to just have those hard conversations until you get to the point where you understand, because otherwise you're going to hand your designs off to a developer and they're going to throw up their hands and say, I cannot build this in the timeline, in the budget that we're given, or I don't have the skill set to build this at all. I just can't do this.
Right.
And so you've got to have an understanding of the skills of the people that you're working with and really, you know, ask the right questions.
So it's kind of knowing, you got to know a little bit of the language so that you can talk the same language. And then you kind of need to know what the people that you're working with are able to do, their abilities, and you got to know where you got to ask, right? Like, this is something they've done before. I'm sure they can do this again. But so do you have in-house data experts?
We have. When we were really selling our own platform more, that was more important. And we still have a much smaller representation within the company. But that's really important. You know, if we had more control over the content and how it was delivered, we found that can be really helpful in the applications.
All right. So Ken had another question. And so you're saying, just want to make sure you say yes or no. Do you think they should teach coding? Like, how deep should they go?
I don't think it's necessarily as important for native application development as it is for web. And can I expound on this a little bit? I know we're running out of time. And I know I'm like wordy guy. But you know, with the web stuff, stop laughing at me. With the web stuff, you know, it's one set of related languages. And now are you going to ask someone to be proficient in design? And what is design? You know, all of the different fields of
right.
design that make up a great product. You're going to ask them to be proficient in all of these things and be good at all of those things and be a good web designer. I mean, a web developer. and know how to code for iOS and know how to code for Android, because we don't just do iOS. We do iOS and Android, and we do Apple TV, and we do Apple Watch, and we do Android TV and Android Wear. And it's a lot to be responsible for. And I think most people are doing really well to have the time to be a really good designer and,
right.
you know, to really care about that, much less to expect them to be good at all these other things as well.
So it's kind of pick what you want to really be good at. And even within design, pick that niche and then understand maybe how, if you've seen something done in another application, then maybe ask somebody. But it's a lot to learn. So it's kind of like a jack of all trades or a master of none. Or you're really good and you're really good in that niche. Yeah.
And, you know, I sometimes annoy our developers because, you know, if they tell me that they can't do something, and, you know, we've been doing this for a few years. So there's some times where, you know, I try to be as respectful as I can be, but there's times where I'm like, you know what, I think you probably can. And so, you know, I'm going to push them a little bit on it. And I may reach out to a developer who did something similar and say, well, how did you guys do that? I may be the guy that goes and harasses somebody. And what you find is a lot of times that these guys are really happy to share their knowledge. You know, sometimes they want to just share their code outright. I would reach out to guys at Facebook and some of these other companies really early on and say, you know, we're interested in doing something similar to what you guys are doing. There's some people that are uncomfortable that they think we may be ripping you off or whatever. They're like, no, here, do you want our code? We're like, no, we don't really want your code, but, you know, we're just interested in kind of taking a similar approach. But yeah.
All right. So then he also wants to know, now that you're doing so well, how much of your work is maintenance of previous work, like maybe the TED Talk, doing a redesign, and then how much are you seeking new work?
We do a lot of maintenance work now. And I think if there's one thing that I wish we could improve on as a company, it's that we were doing more work where we were responsible for both design and development. There are some of our clients who depend on us only for design. There's some of them that depend on us only for development. And I think our best work comes, and I think we're happier as a company when design and development work together, because you know, we don't typically have as much input later on if we hand design off to someone else. And so what it ends up coming out looking like could be a good bit off from what we intended for it to be. And our developers get frustrated because, you know, they end up having to deal with inexperienced designers who don't speak the same language.
Absolutely. You already are a team and you work well together, right?
Yeah. So there is a good bit of what we do right now that is maintenance work, but we still do some new fresh stuff, some stuff that I can't talk about right now that's upcoming, but yeah.
So, all right. So one thing I know we didn't really get to, I think we answered your questions. Can you make sure, can you tell me yes or no or whatever? And you know, Rusty, I was not laughing at you. Like, I love you. Like, I'm not. Okay. Yeah. I just didn't want you to think, oh my gosh, she's so mean. All right. So we kind of covered whatever. So
me and Shrieking Violet, who are going to have a little party as soon as this is over.
Those developers who they come into work who say they can't, and then you sit that on their desk, and then hopefully it's geared up to say, be brave. I can be brave or something. I think that would be really funny. All right. So you do lead a team. So you went from 5 people where you're the only designer, and then it grows and you hire some great designers. The design team I know is small, a smaller team compared to maybe the developer team. And hey, Peter, so what does it take? And I think you're a great leader, and you've told me about some of those things of what it takes to lead and to lead those other designers.
So, you know, and Diane really doesn't want to know the answer to this. She just dropped off. And so, very lucky for the rest of you, we get to return to Shrieking Violet.
Will you take care of me?
I will take care of you.
Oh, man, she likes that a lot. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
it's like
she
if I
does.
move from the right to the left too quickly, it goes away. So I'm just moving my mouse really slow. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Do I need to repeat that?
Yeah. Oh, no. It was the question about the design team
Yeah.
and the leadership thing.
And they've all gone to Creative South and Jesse?
Yeah. Jesse and Alan will be back this year.
Yay.
And Jesse has worked with us for a few years now, 3 or 4 years, and Alan's been with the company almost as long as I have. And here's the thing. Alan's one of the folks I had to lay off when we scaled back to 5 people because he was with the company when we were doing the screensaver stuff. And he came back once we got the app stuff rolling because we love working with each other. It just didn't work out. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is to lay off a guy that, I love Alan. I think he's a great guy and, he's a good designer. And, we are kind of like a small family here with our guys. So,
yeah,
I think the best thing you can do as far as hiring folks is hire good, smart people. And as far as managing and leading those folks, it's to trust them and try to get out of their way as much as you can and let them do what you've hired them to do.
How do you? How do you find that early on, like during in a interview or something, or is this something that you have to know them before you really can trust them, or know that they're not going to give up and they're going to put in 110%?
I think you just got to be honest that sometimes you're going to make mistakes. And the best thing you can do when you make a mistake, and I'm not always good at this, is to move on and realize that it's business. And, that sometimes doesn't play well with my, we're a small family thing. But, you got to realize that sometimes it's not a good fit. Sometimes it looked like it was going to be a good fit. All the cues were there from the interviews and the work's good. Maybe it's not the work that's the problem. Maybe it's, they're not reliable. They don't come in on time, or they're not good at communicating, or they have a thick skin that you thought you had asked the right questions, but you didn't. And, if someone is a smart, a motivated designer, I'm much more concerned with the kind of social aspects. Are they going to be somebody that I'm going to want to spend 8 hours a day with every day, 5 days a week? Because, this is a big part of your life. And I don't care how brilliant you are as a designer. If you make me miserable, I don't want to work with you.
Right. Yeah, but how can you take that to HR? You know what? She just makes me miserable.
Well,
Did you say that? I don't like her.
It's not about the liking.
I know.
But it
is. So it's that it doesn't gel, and that it just always feels because it is. You are working on. So does each of you work on the same? Everybody's working on TED, or you work on TED and they work on something else?
No, and every client is different. And there have been projects where all of us are working on the same thing and we're working together. Even when I'm working, like the TED project, I worked on that by myself, but I am pulling those guys in because I want feedback. I want feedback from them. I want feedback from people that are outside of the company on what we're doing as we're doing it. So to the point that that clients are comfortable, I'll share a little bit of the work that I'm doing with other designers that I respect and get their feedback as well. So, I don't like to work in a bubble where, I'm the only one working on things. So we do a lot of, we use Slack a lot to communicate with each other. We use Hangouts now that Jesse's remote. Got a nice little round table here in my office that we'll all sit around, and got a nice big whiteboard that we can all draw on. And I think that's a really great way to get some early ideas out.
I think that's one of the great things. One of the things that makes you a great leader, because you really value your people, and you value their opinion on your stuff. Also, it's not like they're afraid to tell you, oh, if you tell Rusty, he's going to bring out that shrinking violet girl, No,
and to be in the position I'm in, sometimes I have to say, you know what, I get final say on this. You have to know when to do that and when not to do that, though. You can't alienate the people around you by saying, you know what, I'm in charge. I always get final say. I'm always going to decide. But when things are getting difficult and, everybody disagrees, especially when everybody disagrees, it's like, you know what? I can be the guy that says this is the direction we're going in.
Right.
Because a lot of times when everybody disagrees, it's pretty clear that either we're just completely on the wrong track and we need to start over, or, you know what, this is probably something that doesn't matter all that much. This is not important to the point where if we make the wrong decision, it's make or break. And you've got to start making the calls on, what do you really care about? And so the things where I don't feel so strongly about, I have to say, even though I have an opinion on that, your opinion is just as valuable as mine, and you win this one because clearly you care about it way more than I do.
Right. So Joshua had a really good comment, or I think a question. So you've hired somebody, and he's asking, how do you avoid hiring folks and then 2 weeks later figure out what they're really good at and then wanting to put them on those projects, but they were hired maybe for something else? You just keep your good people? You just keep Alan happy?
I think the bigger challenge for us is that things do change all the time. Like, the industry's constantly changing, and the types of clients that we get is constantly changing. So the bigger challenge that we have is you put someone on a project, and our projects can go for a long time, especially the projects that are in maintenance mode. So like we've had developers who have been on projects for Comcast and I'm expecting the whole side of this to blow up with negative Comcast comments. But we've had people working with Comcast for years, and it can be challenging to be on a single project for an extended period of time. Or, when they first started, they may have been focused on particular challenges that really fit their needs. But, they've been at it for 2 years, and they're like, you know what, I really want to move off to something else. And the timelines and budgets and, where everybody goes doesn't always work out that way. So, I don't know. I did a horrible job at answering the question.
So, I would think that you would have to, in an interview, talk about flexibility, since you get different things and things change. And how do you kind of assess that? Because it seems like, I think in creative fields, it's different than in other fields like accounting. Granted, I don't like accounting, so I don't really know. But most of those people are just doing their own thing. They're just doing their own thing. They're not having to go talk to Judy about number 5 or something, So it's really important. How do you assess in an interview as to how they how they have worked flexibly and how they have, take criticism and stuff? I don't know.
I have to typically ask some questions to know if they're going to be comfortable not always working on the sexy things, because I don't need them just to do the creative work. I need them to do the production work as well. And, there are a lot of what we do on a daily basis that's not sexy.
Right.
It's a part of the whole that gets the final product out the door. We do a lot of the QA work, especially on the projects that we design around here. So much of the QA is visual.
QA, quality, what do you say?
Quality assurance.
Okay. Why assurance?
Yeah. I don't know.
That does. Anyway, okay.
I didn't create the language.
Okay. So quality assurance. So what does that mean for somebody like me who doesn't know what that means?
So we will get a beta build of an application or an early alpha build, which an alpha build is something that you're definitely not going to show a client. But, we're all professionals here, and we know that some particular feature section's not built yet, but there's certain things that we can go ahead and start evaluating. And as things move through the beta process, at a certain point, we will start sharing that more broadly. So at a certain point in the beta testing process, we'll start handing that off to the client, because what we found is if we hand those things off to the client too early, they a lot of times get really concerned and scared that, oh, this isn't at all what I wanted, or, where's the section? And they'll get super focused on a particular thing, and it's just counterproductive. But with the QA stuff, we're looking from a functionality standpoint, from a data standpoint, from a visual standpoint, if everything matches what the original goals and intent of the app is. And so, we try to do some decent documentation. We're not as good at it as we probably should be. I think that's something that we could grow at. We're really good at doing markup, at providing pixel perfect design and assets. So we a lot of times refer back to those things and say, okay, we delivered these things to you. This thing needs to move over a certain amount. And, we get to a certain point where we don't always say, this thing is 2 pixels off. It must be done. But when we're early in the process, what we'll find a lot of times is that things are, 10 or 15 pixels off. And if I've got to get in on a screen early on in the process and something's 10 or 15 pixels off, as a developer, you should expect that you're going to get everything that's 2 pixels off as well. That's just the way it is.
Right.
Once you're in there, you might as well fix it all. And so we want these things to match as closely to what the original design intent was as possible. And not everybody works that way. There's a lot of people that are a lot more flexible at those things and say, you know what, as long as that logo is generally in the area that we asked for it to be in, we're cool with that. And, we try to care about those details and, get it right, or get it as right as we possibly can under the timeline and budget.
Right. Okay. So Brian has a question, and he says you might have touched on this already, but probably not, because we've been talking not really a lot about hiring since you got here.
We've been talking about creepy dolls.
We have. We've talked a good bit about that. Not really. How do you keep good, talented people? That's a good question, especially like people like Jesse who had to move away, or Alan had to come back, or got to come back, or whatever. I love Alan. Good, talented people that may not be getting paid as much as they should, or have the benefits as some of the other employees, or knowing that the person has a ton of potential to have them stick it out and pay them. Pay them or give them the show more. I don't know. Give them the benefits they deserve.
Well, this is the easiest question I'm going to have to answer, because these guys here have always been great with that. They compensate us fairly. I feel like we get paid a fair wage for what we do. And I rarely have to go to bat for my guys. Typically, I've got higher ups coming to me saying, we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, before I'm having to make requests. So
they value their team.
They value them, and they realize exactly that, if someone's unhappy with the pay, that odds are there's someone else that is going to give them the same opportunity or a better opportunity for better pay, or someone's going to say, you know what, I'm willing to take a step back. I'm willing to be less happy with the work because I value the pay. That's more important to me right now. And so, we've just tried not to make that an issue.
So I also think, thanks, Andre. Sorry, I know we gone over a little bit.
Good to meet you.
So I think sometimes just telling people and be appreciative of people. There's something weird. Like I heard a noise in my office, and there's no one else.
It's Shrieking Violet.
I know. Did you hear? It's like a deep drum.
She's not here anymore.
Whatever.
Diane.
So, did you hear that? Did you guys hear that, or no? You didn't hear?
I heard it.
Oh, you did? It's weird. Anyway, but like telling someone, that, hey, here's something I appreciate about you. Sometimes that goes a long way. I know that there's like love languages, 5 love languages, and one of them probably can't do at work. It's physical touch. Like, hey, nice to meet you. Let me rub your shoulders. Probably not that one. Yeah. But like gifts, or like my sister, for her team, she'll bring snacks, and every week she brings new snacks. So if they get hungry, they have something, and they're good, healthy snacks, and then not so healthy snacks, But I think go ahead.
We do a lot of those things, and like the Bay Area companies, companies out in San Francisco, tech companies, they are brilliant at like giving their people everything they could possibly give them, because they've got a bunch of young folks, and they're like, don't go home, just stay here and continue to do your work constantly. So they'll have like free kitchens where, you can get lunch, breakfast, and dinner, and these elaborate fitness facilities and all these perks of working there. And on a smaller scale, like we do what we call family lunch every 2 weeks, where we bring in catered lunch and we all get together as a group and we hang out and have lunch together. We once a month have a social hour, which is supposed to be today, and I've actually kind of planned that, and I think we decided we're going to do it tomorrow now. And we do some volunteering together. There's a little homeless shelter thing that we go to and help feed the hungry once a month. And within my department, we swap Christmas gifts and, those little things. But, I haven't always been good at that. Diane, you're the type of person that's great at paying compliments and
that's my love language, words of affirmation.
And I'm self-absorbed and so concerned with paying attention to myself that I don't always think to ask someone else. But what's bothering you right now? But our CEO is fantastic at that. He's been a great example for me to care about other people, to give them positive affirmation, tell them that they're doing a great job. He is such a cheerleader for the guys around here, and it's been great.
But I think one thing Brian, you could do with your team is see if one of your employees is really passionate. They have a passionate side project, like Rusty, they do something with the homeless. Maybe they do something with little kids and they say, hey, you know what? We want to help volunteer. Can we come or can we help you with the next event? I mean, to me, that would mean a lot. If somebody in my team said, hey, you know what, we want to help you with the next blank event, Diane, can we do that and show you, because we can't pay you anything else. And that would really mean a lot to me. So that might be a good idea. Maybe. I'm full of a lot of ideas. They're not all good. All right. So we're going to Creative South, me and Rusty. So make sure you hunt us out.
And Shrieking Violet.
Oh, is she going to come?
I don't know. She might.
That'd be pretty cool. I love the hair. So I don't think Brian's seen it. Pull her throat.
Okay, here we go. If she says the same thing again, so help me. I'm going to pull her head off.
People are so big.
Ooh, that was new.
People are always so big.
I thought she said, I go, uh-oh.
Okay, let's try it again.
I'm called Shrieking Violet.
I'm called Shrieking Violet.
I know. I love the way the eyes move, Matt. That, it's weird. We don't move our eyes as we talk, So, Matt.
This has been my favorite thing. If y'all want to get back together sometime and just do an hour of us pulling that string, I'm completely cool with that.
So Rusty, I always appreciate you. We will have to do a part 2, but I think you probably will be okay with that maybe. But you're really smart and you are really kind, and I would love to work for you. I think you have a great way with people. You trained me when I was at VCU, so I thought you were great, but you were always we're just even, I can help you do whatever. And I think it's just, you're really laid back. But even if there was a problem, you were always kind of we'll get it, it'll be fine. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we have a problem. You're it's just, we were so different in that. But
I wasn't always like that. I was sometimes let's burn it all down.
Well, sometimes maybe, but most of the time every time I see you, and it had been years, maybe 10 years since I had seen you, and at Creative South 2 years ago, I guess more than 10 years, but it was just I had just seen you a couple weeks ago. So it was always nice. I always love friends like that. So anyway, I'm glad you're my friend.
Looking forward to seeing you again in a couple weeks.
Yeah, me too. And Alan and Jesse. So you guys will have to say hey. And Jesse's bringing her baby. So
yeah,
that's the one, Peter, I asked you about. Remember? I Slack channeled you on that one. So she's bringing her. She's in Seattle, right? Or somewhere in Washington?
Yes. She's in Washington right now. Her husband's in the military and was based in Fort Campbell, which is right outside of Clarksville, where I went to undergrad studies at Austin Peay. And then he got transferred. He got moved around a good bit. Oh, thanks. The hatch showed.
So,
she got moved around a good bit, and now is out in Washington, not in Seattle. I can't remember exactly.
It's a big state.
I guess, but yeah.
So, why do you take your team to Creative South?
Because it's completely different than what we do on a daily basis. And, we don't necessarily want to go to a conference and hear people regurgitate the things that we are already familiar with and deal with on a daily basis. And that may sound awful and arrogant that, like we got this all figured out. And it's not that. It's just that it's a lot more inspiring to go and see like visual design, which is not necessarily always the biggest part of what we do on a daily basis, and draw inspiration from that and things that are different but in a related field.
Right.
And we always come back really jazzed to get back to work after that.
So then you also always go to the fair and you go ride the rides. And I always think that's really fun that you guys are like, we're kicking out, we're going to the fair.
There's this weird fair that's been there the last 2 years that we've been, and it's bizarre. And it's like, you know what? There's the Gravitron and a Ferris wheel over there. I'm doing this. And we're going to go and spend $20 at the fair. And these folks are looking at us like, what are you doing? A bunch of grown men walking around, riding kid rides and eating cotton candy. But yeah, it's fun. We get a big laugh out of that, and it's a good bonding experience.
So for everybody who stayed in, there's something you're giving them, right? The iOS 9 toolkit.
Yeah. So, let's talk about that for a second.
Okay, and I'm clicking the link right here.
Okay, so we yesterday released this crazy iOS UI kit, which we've released 3 in the past. Very, very early on, like iOS 2, I think. We pushed one out. That was like 2009. And then we took some time off.
Oh, it said server not found, Johnny said. Maybe Peter did it, right? Did I do the wrong thing? Anyway, did it work?
Is the link working?
Server not found. Link not working. Okay.
Oh, okay. It was missing something.
An A. Oh, booger, or a colon. Okay, keep going. Keep talking. I'll try to fix whatever it is.
So anyway, we released these in the past, and we do it partially because we use them ourselves. And once you go to all that effort to create it for yourself, you might as well share it with other folks. And partially because it's a good marketing opportunity. It's a good way for us to get the word out about the company and for other people to know how much we care and how much we value detail in what we do. So we just shared this. It's on Product Hunt right now. And it's like, I think it's number 3 or 4 on Product Hunt today, which is kind of blowing my mind. It's a good thing to do. It makes me feel good to give back.
And it's big. It's a big kit.
Yeah, it took a long time to do it. But we think that those things are helpful. It makes, like, as I was building this out, Alan and Jesse were using it on new projects that we were doing at the company and providing feedback on, things that needed to be adjusted and whatnot. And, in the past, we've only done the kit for Illustrator because that's what we typically use for all of our work in-house, is Illustrator primarily to build out the screens, and we'll, use Photoshop in conjunction with that. But this year we decided to port it over to Sketch as well. And part of that is because we are interested in possibly using Sketch in the future, and we wanted to learn a little bit more. And part of it is honestly, selfishly, because Sketch users are crazy evangelical about using Sketch.
I know, Peter's talking about it. I don't know what 4TW means because I'm old.
It's for the win.
For the win. It could be for the world. But
for the doll. No, it couldn't be for that. Sorry.
So he converted after a single day, Peter said. So you did it for Sketch also, and this was a new thing though that you're doing. So it's actually available for download for either for Illustrator or Sketch, right?
Yep. And if you go and go to that link, read the post. I'm a little evil in the fact that I write all this stuff and put the download link at the bottom. But I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to spend all this time building this thing, you're going to have to listen to me talk a little bit about it, or you're just going to have to scroll to the bottom and click the download link. But you're going to be inconvenienced a little bit by this wall of text before you get down there. But if you scroll down to the bottom a little ways past the download link, there's some information about a giveaway that we're doing where we're giving away 2 Mercury hoodies, kind of like this one that I'm wearing right now. So if you want a free hoodie, and they're American Apparel for the guys, and they're Bella and Canvas for the women's, so they're nice hoodies.
You need a hoodie for Shrinking Violet.
A tiny hoodie. Will you make her a hoodie and bring it to Creative South?
I don't know about that. Maybe my ghost can. So I want to share some ways that people could get in touch with you. And so I call it stalking.
Thanks,
like
Josh.
That's how I know Chad Powell got married. I probably said congratulations or something, but it's like I always try to keep up with my people. And I mean, I think Chad graduated like maybe 10 years ago, but I try to keep up because I love my students, and you're always going to be mine. So I love that Rusty said it was stalk me. So if you forget or whatever, you can always go to rechargingyou.com and then just do a search for Rusty Mitchell or leading a mobile app design team or something. Anyway, so here is, he said, stalk me. And then it's his Twitter or his Dribble.
My sad Dribble.
It's just Rusty. Like you're the only Rusty.
I was early on, man.
Clearly.
I had some connections.
I guess so. Hey, man,
I'm special.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just going to go with my first name. Okay, Madonna. So then I always hate it when kids only write like their first name on a paper. I'm like, look, you're not Madonna. Like, go ahead and write your last name, buddy. But clearly you don't have to on Dribble. All right, so and then here he is at Mercury. So you guys can look at Mercury.
Yep.
And then I think I shared everything else. It was just those two stalking ways, right?
And yeah, and if you guys are at Creative South, you are more than welcome to come to the carnival with us. We would love to have you. The more the merrier. I mean, if we could just fill up the Ferris wheel with just people that are from Creative South, let's do it.
That'd be fun.
Definitely, if you see us there, come and say hi. I'm a shy guy, but I'd be happy to talk awkwardly with you at Creative South.
So you're not awkward at all, but I know that you might feel, he is quiet. He's pretty quiet. He's probably not going to go up to you, but you can definitely go up to him. And I just was like, Rusty, right?
You can do that. Diane can do that. She's the only one that can do that.
All right. So so somebody's asking, where is this Ferris wheel? Matt's asking this.
It's, I don't know. They got like a convention center, and like the last couple of years they've had big concerts on Saturday night. I forget who was, it's like R. Kelly or somebody was the concert the last Saturday that we were there, which was like, if I'd only known. I mean, what could be better to close out Creative South than an R. Kelly concert?
Right.
I mean, really. But yeah, I mean, there's just this weird carnival there, and we just happened to come in the back way the first year, and we noticed that it was there. We're like, special note, got to go back to that to see what that's all about later. And after we did it the first year, we're just like, well, it's a given. We got to do that from now on. It's like, is it going to be there again this year? And so last year when we went back, it was there again. This is absolutely amazing. I have no idea whether it'll be there this year or not, whether the dates have aligned, but hopefully it will. So
Joshua just shared your upvote. So that was what Rusty was saying. So upvote that 9.3 iOS kit on Designer News, and that'll help Rusty out. So if you've enjoyed today, which I have, you are super smart and you're super humble. You really are. You know a lot. So, and it's good that you kind of came from a different background and then you just trudged through. I think that's really impressive.
That's fun. Like I've always, I thought I'd missed the boat. Like I had an interest in app design and development, and thought I was like the old guy who had kind of already defined their path and wasn't going to be able to make that transition. And was very fortunate to have some people that trusted that I could do that.
So sometimes it's just a good design, right?
Yeah, it's a great starting point.
Right, absolutely. Well, thank you guys. We got it. I know it's super late. My mom's going to be like, "You went way over," but she'll say it in a much southern voice. But next week I'm taking off, and then the following week I have Richard Longiri, and I'm not sure how to say his name, but he's always at Creative South. He works for Realtree, but he was a photographer in the military, but then he retired or whatever, and then now he's working for Realtree. But he's a designer and he's an illustrator. He wanted to be an illustrator, so that's on like the 20 something. What's 3 plus 7? 10? 30th? Right? On the 30th, I'm terrible with math. So Peter's saying Rich is the best. So his posters are amazing. He's a great illustrator. It's just really cool to see some of the things that other people you kind of are doing on the side. So, and he's kind of quiet too at Creative South, so you can always go up to him. So tune in for one more episode before Creative South, but not next week, the week after. So one more thing from Cutie Pie there.
Yeah, thanks guys. I really appreciate everybody hanging out and asking cool questions. So don't you think she should have the last word?
Well, wait. So not next week. So Brian's typing March 23rd. I think it's 23rd plus 7, right? So then it would be the 30th, because that's when Richard's on. Thank you, guys. Okay, now, thank you for coming.
Thanks, guys.
I wish I were brave like you.
I wish I were brave like you.
Bye,
That's
guys.
everybody in the comment section.
Bye, guys.
Bye.